I think this is a really important gathering that we have here in this beautiful setting at a really amazing moment in time. And from space, what's really, really clear is that everything is changing. It's changing faster than ever before. And it's not just happening in one industry or one nation or one region. It's happening all across the world, and it's affecting every sector of our society. And so these are truly exciting times to be in. But we got to make sure that we're on the right side and we're going in the right direction. Now, some of the changes that we've seen are due to positive things, like revolutionary new technological advancements, new powerful ways to reach consumers and customers, an explosion of collaborative tools, some powered by blockchain and other distributed technology. Also AI, new materials, new sensors tied to the Internet of Things, improvements in 3D printing, autonomous vehicles. The list goes on and on and on of all these wonderful things that are helping us to advance our civilization. But the changes that we've seen are also due to the disruption and the uncertainty that's all around us. I don't think I have to tell everybody as I look out in the audience and see everybody with masks and the fact that we haven't been together in a couple of years now, almost 2 years. We're living through very uncertain times, and there's lots of issues that are affecting our ability to move our projects forward, our businesses forward, everything from worldwide pandemics to instability of the EU, political gridlock around the world, to the various refugee crises all around the world, and all these other things that are affecting our ability to progress and to proceed. Now, we can see all these changes, and we can allow them to let us shrink, to become more conservative in our approaches, or we can see them as opportunities. We can learn how to engage disruptive change with success rather than fear it. This means that we need to rethink our assumptions about leadership, management, innovation, everything. We need to rethink our assumptions about everything. And this also means embracing new ways of conducting business, as well as what success will even look like in a world where technology is rapidly defining what work even means. It's time to create an exponentially prosperous future, and we're going to do that with visionary thinking. An exponentially prosperous future that operates within our planet's limits, within the limits, the planetary limits of Earth, and one that treats all the members of our human family equitably and with respect and dignity. To steer towards this visionary and restorative future, it's time right now to make a course correction. It's time to rethink business models. It's time to rethink our relationship with technology, our planet, and each other. It's time to use our imagination and creativity to create the new jobs, technologies, and business models we'll need in this exponentially changing world. We are really living in a time of exciting new potential. Now, in order to successfully capitalize on the opportunities that are all around us, we need to take a holistic approach and strive to see how everything fits together. We need to understand that protecting the environment and moving our businesses forward are not mutually exclusive. In fact, they're complementary. We can take an environmentally sustainable business approach while developing new and exciting products and services, creating more jobs, and increasing profitability. Above all else, we need to understand that as daunting and significant as all this uncertainty and all these changes are, they're just the tip of the iceberg. We are entering into a new human epoch where everything will change, especially how we conduct business and how we tackle the problems facing us. One of the best ways to navigate the uncertainty that's all around us is through collaboration. Collaboration that leads to shared strength. Now, the way to see the path forward and the focus of our discussion today is to zoom out to a higher vantage point, a vantage point where all the pieces of the puzzle come into view. We can see who has them and what picture they paint for our society and for our businesses. Now, over the course of my career, I've had the opportunity to have some amazing experiences. And these experiences have given me a very unique big picture perspective of our planet. The purpose of our discussion today is to put all these changes that we've seen in the business landscape into a big picture perspective. I want to put them into an orbital perspective. And in doing so, trends, truths, and the path forward becomes clearer. So to set the stage, I want you all to imagine that you're on the International Space Station, and you're looking down through the windowed cupola at our beautiful planet, turning silently and slowly below you, floating weightless there in that windowed observatory. You watch as thunderstorms cast long shadows across the horizon as we approach one of our 16 daily orbital sunsets. And as you close in on that line below you, that line that separates day from night, you see the clouds turn from pink to red and to gray and finally black. And as you cross into the nighttime shadow of the Earth, you gasp as all of the evidence of human activity, all the lights of the cities and towns, all of a sudden comes into view. You see the paparazzi-like flashes of lightning storms, dancing curtains of auroras that seem so close it's as if you could reach out and touch them. From space, I believe that you would marvel at the incredible paper-thin layer of our atmosphere. And you would be struck by the sobering contradiction that that paper-thin layer is keeping every living thing on our planet alive. But I also believe that seeing the planet from space would fill you with hope. Seeing the unlimited potential of what we can accomplish when we work together, as demonstrated by the International Space Station itself, would extend your optimism. Your definition of the word home would rapidly expand to encompass the Earth in its entirety, and for the first time, you might fully understand what it means to be part of one human family. Obviously, you don't have to go to space to realize any of this. But what going to space did for me is it started me on a journey towards a deeper understanding of the beauty of our underlying interdependent fabric of life. Separation from the natural world enabled me to become a detached witness to its splendor and to its beauty and to its unity. But a little over 50 years ago, humanity as a whole had an out-of-body experience, a collective out-of-body experience, an out-of-body experience that led to an inflection point between two human epochs. And the story of this out-of-body experience begins on December 21st, 1968, at the Kennedy Space Center in Florida. Atop the tallest, the heaviest, the most powerful rocket ever brought to operational status, the Saturn V, sat the crew of Apollo 8. There was Commander Frank Borman, Command Module Pilot Jim Lovell, and Lunar Module Pilot Bill Anders. The aim of the mission was to become the first mission in history, the first crewed mission in history, to fly to the moon, orbit around the moon, and of course, to return to Earth safely. On that mission, we as a species experienced an inflection point. We experienced an evolutionary phase shift where humanity was given the opportunity to transcend our humble beginnings and ascend to incomprehensible heights, both literally and figuratively. Now, the inflection point occurred when Apollo 8 came up from behind the far side of the moon on their fourth orbit, and they witnessed something that was never seen before by human eyes. Commander Borman was the first to see the amazing sight, and he called in excitement to the others, taking a black and white photo in the process. And it was all captured on the flight voice recorder, but I don't think we're going to hear it. But I'll let this play just for a second, just to see if we do. Okay, again, apologies for that. But as the crew experienced the Earth coming up from behind the lunar horizon, I wonder if they realized the significance of that moment. They had just become the first humans in history to see the whole planet hanging in the blackness of space, and the first to capture that for the rest of us. This famous image, known as Earthrise, is probably the most influential photograph ever taken. This image revolutionized how we see the world, how we see ourselves, with its simple message that we are one people traveling on one planet toward one shared future. But unfortunately, the meaning and the significance of this image has, for the most part, been forgotten. But back in 1968, for a brief moment, the world was one. People from all over the world, even in the Soviet Union, a nation that was locked in a Cold War with the West and a space race with the US, declared this a monumental achievement for all of humanity. For a brief moment, the Earth rallied around the image of Earthrise, and I think it's time that we rally around this image again. This image highlights a sobering contradiction when we look at our planet from this perspective. In this breathtaking beauty is a deep heralding to the unity that we as a species are called to. But in spite of this beauty, when you zoom into the microscopic details at ground level, things appear to be different. If we zoom into this photograph, realizing that it was taken at the end of 1968, we see that all is not as it seems. Apollo 8 came at the end of 1968, a year that had seen much strife in the United States and most of the world. The year saw political assassinations and massive unrest in the streets and cities all around the world. And although the threats that we're facing today are somewhat different, we are living through at least equally chaotic times. In order to navigate this uncertainty and to capitalize on the exponential progress that can come from transmuting chaos into the rocket fuel of innovation, we need to find the right map. We need to find the right map to take us through the shifting terrain. We need a new guidepost. Now, one of those assassinations in 1968 was Dr. Martin Luther King. But precisely 1 year before the Apollo astronauts were hurtling through space on their journey to the moon, Dr. King gave a sermon. It was the Christmas Sermon on Peace, which gives words to what Earthrise evoked. And in it, which normally you would hear, he talks about the interrelated structure of all reality. He says, we're not going to have peace on Earth until we understand the basic fact of the interrelated structure of all reality, that what happens to one happens to all. And this interrelated structure of all reality isn't a cliche or a philosophy. This is the reality of the world that we live in. This is fact. And what will usher in a new human epoch is a greater understanding of the basic fact of the interrelated structure of all reality. And to illustrate this basic fact, I want to take you on a trip to space and back. So my most vivid childhood memory, and the first moment where I realized I wanted to be an astronaut, was July 20th, 1969. It was on that day as I, as a small boy, along with millions and millions of people all around the world, watched those first footsteps on the moon. Now, I don't think I would have been able to put it in these words at the time, but at some level, I realized that humanity had just become a different species. We were a species no longer confined to our planet. And I wanted to be a part of that group of explorers that was able to step off our planet and look back upon ourselves. Now, that dream came true about 4 decades later when I launched into space along with the crew of STS-124 aboard Space Shuttle Discovery. And I remember on the day of launch, we all climbed into our spacesuits. I remember leaving the crew quarters and boarding this astrovan that would take us out to the launch pad, waving to everybody as we stepped out. We got to the launch pad one by one. We climbed through the hatch of Discovery and into the spaceship. And after we were all strapped in, I had a little bit of time to think. There I was laying on my back, strapped to 4.5 million pounds of explosives, and it's one of these wonderful moments that life gives you for self-reflection. And I briefly wondered what I was getting myself into. But right in front of me, there was a countdown clock in the center of Discovery's control panel. As it got down below 10 seconds, I got ready for the main engines to light. So imagine there's like the sound of rockets going right now, and the whole room is shaking right now. So the launch was just absolutely incredible. You know, it looks like it just lumbers off the launch pad, but what it feels like inside is it feels like all of us were on the end of a giant slingshot, and somebody just let go, and off we were going. We were going somewhere, and we were going somewhere fast. And we go from having a force of 3 times our weight, 3 Gs, pushing us into our seat feeling like an elephant is sitting on our chest to being weightless instantly when the main engine's cut off. And the main engine's cut off 8.5 minutes after we launch. And inside the spacecraft, as we start floating, I remember thinking to myself, we made it. And I was also acutely aware that my childhood dream of flying in space had just come true. Although going to space was an incredibly overwhelming visual experience, it was also much, much more. What I experienced in space was an immense gratitude. Gratitude for the opportunity to see the Earth from this vantage point, and gratitude for the gift of the planet that we've all been given. And in some ways, I can't fully explain, being physically detached from the Earth made me feel deeply interconnected with everyone on it, interconnected and interdependent with everyone on it. From space, I was able to look back and see what we have always been, one single human family with a common origin. And now, in a very real way, I had a deep awareness of the reality of our shared future. And this is an awareness that I didn't always have. Now, I was born in the year that Yuri Gagarin became the first human to fly in space. This was at the height of the Cold War. 50 years later, almost to the day, from the very same launch pad that Yuri Gagarin launched from, I launched into space as a fully integrated member of a Russian spacecraft crew with a couple of Russian military officers on a spacecraft called Gagarin. And as we stood at the base of the rocket that would take us to space on a cold April evening from a previously top-secret Soviet military installation, I looked up at the rocket and I saw an American flag and a Russian flag side by side. That image was burned into me. You have to realize that I spent the first 15 years of my adult life training to fight the Russians, the West's most threatening enemy at the time. I was a Cold War fighter pilot stationed on the tip of the sword in the former West Germany before the fall of the Berlin Wall. And I fought in combat in another part of the world where I saw firsthand the horrors of war. Back then, I was operating in a two-dimensional us versus them world. So this is the image of our world, the image of our civilization that our society is currently based on. It's a two-dimensional landscape of nation-states fighting and competing over resources and ideologies. It's a landscape where not only nations compete, but also NGOs, corporations, special interest groups, political parties. And this is the real world. This is the image taken by the Apollo 8 astronauts over 50 years ago. This image proclaims the fact that we are one people traveling through the universe together on one planet towards one shared destiny. From this perspective, you can't see nation states. All you see is our home planet Earth. So let's look back again at this two-dimensional image. What we need to understand is that this is something that we created, but it wasn't created based on the reality of our world. This image is the guidepost of the old human epoch. Now, this image may have served us in the past. It may have been appropriate before we realized how interconnected and interdependent we all are. It may have been appropriate before we realized that humans could destroy the very life support systems of our planet. And it may have been appropriate when nations could operate in relative isolations. But this is no longer the appropriate guidepost for our actions. This is the appropriate guidepost for our actions. This is reality. But the way that we're currently making our political and business decisions are based on the two-dimensional map. In order for humanity to progress and prosper, we must deal with the very real problems and challenges facing us in the context of the real world. We need to enter into a new human epoch and design and build a future that is based on the image of Earthrise. A foundational piece of the construction of our future is business enterprise. Business has the incredible power to either destroy our world by clinging to the two-dimensional mindset of the old human epoch, an epoch obsessed with competition, conquest, growth, profit maximization at all costs, or save it by embracing Earthrise and entering into a new human epoch based on three key pillars: interdependence, long-term thinking, and profound collaboration, all wrapped in the blanket of empathy and compassion. We cannot continue as a species with a two-dimensional map as our model. The principles of Earthrise will lead to a positive, restorative future, a future where 10 billion joyful humans can live within our Earth's planetary limits in peace and harmony, a future that we would all want to be a part of. Now, during my time in space, and I spent 6 months in space, basically, I got into a routine where I would almost say goodnight to the Earth. When it was time to get ready for bed, I'd go to the cupola, which is this windowed observatory on the bottom of the space station, or the Earth-facing side of the space station. And I would just gaze at the Earth for a while and take in this beautiful sight. And as I would take in this indescribably beautiful planet, I would think about our future. I would think, what is the world going to look like in the next 50 years? How far would we progress in overcoming the challenges and problems facing our world, facing our society? Now, I launched into space with a belief that we already, right now, have all the resources, all the technology necessary to solve many, if not all, the problems facing our planet. And I spent a good bit of my time earth-gazing, pondering the question, if that statement is true, why do we still face so many issues and challenges? And I think the seeds to the answer to that question were planted 3 years earlier on my first space flight. On the third spacewalk of that mission, my feet were clamped to the end of the space station's robotic arm. And with me attached to the arm, it was flown through a maneuver that we called the windshield wiper. And this took me across a large arc across the top of the space station and back. And at the top of this arc, I was about 30 meters above the space station, looking down at this incredible outpost, this incredible orbiting outpost against the backdrop of our indescribably beautiful planet, 240 miles or 300 kilometers below. And the sheer beauty of that scene took my breath away. But more important than the beauty of that scene, and more compelling than the beauty of that scene, was the incredible human accomplishment that the International Space Station represents. You have to understand that 15 nations built the International Space Station. Some, as we all know, some of these nations weren't always the best of friends. Some were on opposite sides of the Cold War, opposite sides of the space race. Some fought wars against each other and purposely targeted each other's civilians in an effort to break each other's will. But somehow, in spite of all that, we found a way to set aside our differences and work together and do this amazing thing in space. And as I hovered there above the space station, I thought, what would the world look like? How many fewer problems and challenges would we face if we can figure out how to have that same level of cooperation, that same level of collaboration, and bring it down to the Earth's surface? Now, this required collaboration will cross industries, boundaries, and borders, and it will involve all sectors of civilization, from governments to citizens to industries. So how can business help usher in this positive future? They can do that by creating the reality where businesses serve the needs of civilization first and foremost, where businesses are not seen as discrete entities operating in a solely self-serving vacuum, but as interdependent nodes in a fabric of prosperity where everybody has the ability to live a good life in harmony with our planet's biosphere and each other. A reality where business and political leaders take a long-term, multi-generational view of investment and progress, where self-centered egoic consciousness is replaced with planetary consciousness, which embraces the basic fact of the interrelated structure of all reality. The path to this future is to build that future from a platform of awe and wonder. And from a platform of awe and wonder comes the certainty that nothing is impossible. We live in a world where the possibilities are only limited by our imagination and our will to act. And we don't have to accept the status quo in our businesses or on the planet. We can build a positive and restorative future, a future that we would all want to be a part of. Now, the path to this future is to build it together in the spirit of collaboration. Now, I've spoken a lot today about collaboration, and I don't want you to think that I'm saying collaboration is easy. It's not. Collaboration usually comes at the expense of building capabilities in-house. Partnerships can involve high transaction costs, and maintaining relationships takes work. There's also a lot of confusion on what true collaboration means. To take an orbital perspective of collaboration means instead of looking at society as an arena for self-interested competition, we view it as an organic whole. Collaboration from this perspective leads to diverse groups all working together seamlessly toward the betterment of the entire social body. The good news is, and I don't have to tell any of you here this, that never before in history has it been easier to incorporate the ideas and efforts from people from all around the world, regardless of political ideology, cultural biases, or geographic location. Now, in addition to the implications for problem solving, I believe that increased levels of open, transparent collaboration will serve as very powerful economic engines that will lead to tremendous restorative economic growth. Those companies that engage in secretive deals, corrupt practices, those that take an exclusively proprietary mindset, those that put the complete focus on short-term profit maximization at all costs, are going to begin to see themselves being left behind. And they will have to adapt, evolve, and take on a much more collaborative mindset and move toward more open practices that put a larger emphasis on long-term objectives in order to participate in the economic growth that true collaboration will bring. Now, let's say someone in here has a great idea on how you can improve collaborative practices in your organization, or maybe you've come up with a breakthrough innovation. It must first be noted that ideas are highly overrated. And what I mean by ideas are highly overrated is while every great accomplishment starts with a great idea, ideas without action are empty. Every great accomplishment will require dedication and hard work for sure, but it will also require at times stepping outside of our comfort zone, stepping outside of the way that we've always done things and look at things from a different perspective. Now, I know that there's inevitably going to be some aversion to change. Any change can be interpreted as a threat that requires an immune response in our organizations to maintain the comfortable status quo. But that resistance to change comes from the illusion that the status quo is safe and stable. In the exponentially progressing world that we live in, the riskiest course of action is to simply keep doing what has worked in the past, to have the false confidence that what worked yesterday will continue to work tomorrow. Risk does need to be managed and mitigated, but it has to be dealt with from the foundational reality that the only thing that's constant is change. Everything has been built on shifting sand. But it's precisely those individuals and organizations that step outside of their comfort zones, and it's precisely at those moments when they have the courage to embrace new innovative technologies and approaches and collaborate across different stovepipes, industries, boundaries, and borders. Those are the ones that affect real progress in this world, positive, disruptive progress. But to effectively collaborate, we need to properly frame the issues. For example, in my work in sustainable development, I at times became frustrated how we keep trying to address issues such as climate change, deforestation, ocean acidification, biodiversity loss as standalone issues. But in reality, they're only symptoms of the underlying root problem. The problem is that we don't see ourselves as planetary. So what do we mean when we say planetary, and why planetary and not global? Well, we don't live on a globe. Global is our computer networks, our financial networks. It's abstract lines covering a sphere. When I looked out the window of the ISS, I saw an iridescent biosphere teeming with life. I didn't see the economy. The economy is a subsystem of society, which in turn is part of the biosphere. That means that our global economy is the wholly owned subsidiary of the biosphere and not the other way around. But since our political, business, and cultural systems put the complete focus on growing the economy at all costs, and since our human-made systems treat everything, including the very life support systems of our planet, as the wholly owned subsidiary of the global economy, it's obvious from the vantage point of space that we're living a lie. We need to move from thinking economy, society, planet to planet, society, economy. Our society is dependent on our planet, and our economy is dependent on society. We need to reorganize and reprioritize these systems, not out of any ideology or eco-philosophy, but rather because this is the reality of the world that we live in. The successful companies of the very near future will be the ones that understand this. I want to talk to you for a moment about the word home. Home is an interesting and powerful word. If we define home as Earth, we can think of our home as a spacecraft traveling through the universe. And since we're all together on spaceship Earth, it should make you wonder about our planet's life support systems. At the moment, Spaceship Earth does not have a closed life support system, which means that we are using up resources faster than they're being replenished. This puts our society on a trajectory that is unsustainable. And therefore, on our current trajectory, there will come a point where we will run out of the resources necessary to sustain life. You don't have to be in orbit to realize that we live on a planet of finite resources, and we need to do something to reduce the rate that we are using up non-renewable resources. And this is not just a way for us to ensure that future generations will have the resources that they will need, but this is also good business now. Businesses today need to find ways to decouple business practices from scarce and constrained resources. Companies that do not take a sustainable business approach and are overly focused on the short term versus the long term are going to be at a massive disadvantage as key resources in the value chain become more and more scarce. But the word home has implications beyond sustainability. To illustrate that, I want to share with you a story of my return to Earth. When our 6-month mission was complete, my 2 Russian crewmates and I climbed into our Soyuz spacecraft. We did a couple of laps around the planet. And as we crossed the south tip of South America, we fishtailed the spacecraft around to point our engines backwards, and I remember seeing this beautiful crescent moon go by my window. We had this fiery, violent ride through the atmosphere at 8 kilometers per second. The parachutes opened, they threw us all over the place. Eventually, we smashed into the ground. And we smashed into the ground so hard that we bounced and we rolled and we flipped over. And now my window was pointed down at the ground. I had a window right here, and it was pointed at the ground. And out of my window, I saw a rock, a flower, and a blade of grass. And I remember thinking to myself, I'm home. And what was really interesting about that thought is I was home, but I was in Kazakhstan. And so to me at that moment, my home wasn't just Houston, Texas, where my family was waiting for me to return. Home was Earth. And our definition of that word home has profound implications for how we problem solve, how we treat each other, how we treat our planet. And what I realized was broadening our definition of the word home to encompass the entire planet did not come with a requirement to forget where we come from, our national, our political, our cultural, our religious, our ethnic identities. It simply means seeing those things in the context of the bigger picture. Now, I've said that business enterprise, which you're all involved with, has the amazing responsibility, amazing power to either destroy our planet or save our planet by embracing a new epoch, by embracing new mindsets and new approaches. And so I want to thank you all for what you're doing and what you will do to help make life on our planet as beautiful as our planet looks from space. You don't have to be in orbit to have the orbital perspective, and by working together, we don't have to accept the status quo on our planet. And so with that, I thank you.